Thomas. Okay.
Good morning, actually good afternoon to Hong Kong. Joined by John Wood here, who is the founder of Room to Read, which was started by you bringing some books by yak to a small village, and has grown into a giant educational charity educating hundreds of children around the world. Quite an amazing story.
Come on. Give me more credit than that. 18 million children in 17 countries.
18 million.
Hundreds, come on.
Did I say hundreds? Anyways, now swept into an entirely new world in the last week of procurement of masks and PPE from southern China, as you started getting calls from the US and around the world. What's going on? What is that world like, and how did it all start?
Yeah, so I've always been, ever since leaving Microsoft, kind of a social entrepreneur. Social entrepreneurs are people who try to fill market gaps and solve problems, not for profit, but for doing it because it's the right thing to do. My wife and I started this project. We call it Operation Mask Lift. It's kind of like an airlift for masks, because a friend of ours who's married to a doctor in Bend, Oregon in the States told us that her husband had been given one mask and told to make it last for 2 weeks. And then another friend had a sister who's a nurse, and the nurse was told that the doctors got masks, the nurses didn't, and the nurses needed to tie a bandana around their face, and that's how they were going into the operating theater. So we naturally thought, that's stupid, that's ridiculous. We've got all these masks in China. Let's try to figure out how we can do the supply chain and actually get masks everywhere people need it, whether it's Japan, the UK, Italy, Spain, US, Canada. No questions asked. We're trying to get as many masks as possible to as many frontline medical workers as possible, as quickly as possible. Because if we don't do that, we're going to just exacerbate an already difficult situation.
Okay, so you've got masks in China, you've got need elsewhere. Sounds like a pretty easy thing to solve.
Oh yeah, gosh, if only. There are significant tailwinds, and I'm an optimistic, get shit done kind of guy. So, but it's really tough right now because 90% of the world's masks are produced in China. China is an economy that can be closed by government whim at any moment if they wish to do so. There's issues, with counterfeiting. There's huge shortages of masks right now, and there's shortages of air freight. So it's not been an easy thing to do. What we're doing literally is we're shipping, in some cases, if we can find a supplier that can do 100 masks here or 200 masks there, we're shipping those out by FedEx. We have 100,000 KN95s rolling off a production line in Yiwu, China tomorrow. We're trying to get 1 million masks sourced for the week of April 14th. So we're doing both big and small, anything we can do. The model, let me explain the model that could really quick, Thomas. What we're doing is, because what happens is governments tend to be slow. We all know that. Hospital systems tend to work at their own unique pace. They want to do procurement guidelines. They tell the vendors, we're going to pay you in 3 weeks. Right now in China, cash is king. You cannot get PPE, you cannot get masks unless you pay the supplier up front. That's not because they're greedy. Oftentimes it's because that's how they acquire their materials. You pay them and then they acquire the materials, they pay their workers. So we've done an adopt a hospital model or an adopt a healthcare worker model where private citizens will actually underwrite the procurement of whether it's 100 masks, 1,000 masks, 5,000 masks. They send us the money. We then on-ship that number of masks to their hospital, their sister, their cousin, whatever it might be, give them the FedEx or the DHL waybill number, they trace it. And so it's a direct citizen to citizen model.
And how are you finding these factories that you're having to give cash to up front, which feels risky in this situation, particularly when you're talking about the market crisis?
Well, no, it's risky, but I mean, let's put it in line. There's a hierarchy of risks right now. There's risks of people dying. There's risk of doctors and nurses. Once they get sick, they're taken out of the hospital, and then they're quarantined at home for 14 days. So to me, the risk of putting $1,000 or $2,000 into the hands of a vendor you don't know very well is a pretty low risk. It's a pretty manageable risk. It's a risk we have to be willing to take. We've told everybody up front, this is not linear. There will be failures. There will be issues. There will be problems. And that's going to stop 90% of people from actually even trying, because we get caught up in this catharsis of, oh my gosh, this is risky. What we're doing is to say there will be mistakes, there will be problems. That's on us. We'll admit it. We'll own it. If I have to write a personal check to cover the stuff that doesn't get out of China, I'll do that. But right now, the main thing is we have to flood the zone, because this pandemic is going to get worse before it gets better. We're still several weeks away from the peak. And quite often, there won't just be one peak. There'll be a second peak, because there'll be a peak. Then it'll start to go down. Then people will feel more comfortable. They'll start to go out. They'll start to socialize. They'll start to go to the bars, and bingo, you get hit with a second peak. Exactly what happened here in Hong Kong. We all thought we were over it. We all thought the worst was past. People went out, they're partying, they're in the streets, they're at restaurants, and then you get the second peak. So this will be a problem that exists for, I don't know, 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks or longer. So we just want to be on top of it and get masks to those frontline healthcare workers.
And how, again, back to these suppliers, how are you finding them? You're sitting in your apartment in Hong Kong. Difficult to source.
No, I mean, look, it took about 5 or 6 or 7 days for us to figure out people who had good intentions versus bad. The good news there is that 90% plus had good intentions. Then it is who can actually produce and get the stuff in the air. That's been much more difficult. We had a supplier today, though. We did a 6,000 mask order this morning from a Hong Kong Chinese supplier. Those masks were in our apartment within 2 hours. The guy then, we paid him by PayPal. The guy then wrote a note to my wife and he said, I'm Hong Kong Chinese. I love North America. I want to donate 2,000 masks personally to this effort. So there's, I think right now in the media, a tendency to kind of bash certain nationalities and to say, oh, who the Italians were, too capricious, or the Chinese vendors are greedy. We're really right now seeing a lot of kind of the best of humanity. We're seeing a lot of people step up. We set up a Neediest cases fund because we realized that a lot of the masks being ordered were going to very wealthy postal codes. And what we said is, let's make sure we can get on top of this. That if a poor hospital, rural, inner city, whatever, needs masks, we can ship them to those hospitals. No questions asked, no money required. We had $57,000 of donations come in the first 7 days for the Neediest Cases Fund. This is wonderful. I'm getting mail now from ER docs around the world, from nurses, and they're saying, I just need 100 KN95 masks. I'm just saying, they're on us. Don't worry. We're getting them in the mail to you as quickly as we can, and the cost to you is zero.
So, interesting question coming from David McIntyre. How much has the wholesale price of masks gone up, and how do you guarantee the quality?
The cost is more than doubled, but it's kind of sort of flattening out as we're getting relations.
Sorry, it's doubled in the last week.
In the last, let's say 3 weeks.
Right.
3 weeks ago, the European governments, which were way ahead of the U.S. government, which right now is a very low bar to be ahead of the U.S. government, but the European governments went in. Ireland sent 60 Aer Lingus jets to China and loaded up with as much PPE as they could buy. That was a great move, but unfortunately, it drove the prices up. So we've seen a doubling of prices over the last probably about 3 to 4 weeks. In terms of the quality, I mean, in this day and age, there are definitely no guarantees. When someone says, how do you guarantee quality? The first thing is, we cannot guarantee quality. But when nurses are being told to tie a bandana around their face, when doctors are laundering their masks and using them for 2 weeks, I can certainly guarantee better quality than that. I don't say that to be flippant. We right now are using suppliers who are FDA certified, who are EU certified, and where we've seen their product. And so I've got one vendor right here, bingo, this morning. Here's their KN95 mask. We'll have HKU, Hong Kong University, test the quality. Here's their 3-ply mask. This is actually the vendor who said he wanted to donate 2,000 on his own. So he's more than given away his profit margin. So we're using FDA, EU certified vendors. When the masks arrive in the US, we're getting them tested. But a lot of hospitals have told us it would be difficult for you to give us anything worse than we have right now. And I think we have to keep that in mind. We live right now, this is life during wartime. There are definitely no guarantees right now.
And speak a little bit about the sending stuff in terms of the freight elements. That's a challenge in and of itself?
Yeah, it's a total challenge. I'm very fortunate that the Asia CEO of Federal Express is someone I've done some trail running with in Hong Kong. So I've just explained the project to her. She and her team have really stepped up in the last 5 days to help us. FedEx, DHL, et cetera, are under severe supply constraints right now because there's just not enough jets going across the Pacific. Demand for space far exceeds supply. This is a failure of governments. I don't understand this. I wrote about this on Twitter and LinkedIn last night. Why do we live in a world? I'm just going to talk for a moment, if I could, as an American citizen. So I have the First Amendment rights to criticize my own government, not any other country's government. The U.S. has thousands of jets that are grounded. The U.S. has the world's most expensive and largest military. Why are there planes not in the air to China to secure PPE? Because private citizens like us can acquire millions of masks. We have the financial backing. We need more financial backing. We have the financial backing to be able to do more. But right now, the cargo, I mean, I had a shipment of 5,000 masks going to Chicago out of Dongguan province. It's right now in Auckland, New Zealand. And if anybody's good at geography, we all know the shortest point between Dongguan, China, and Chicago is not Auckland, but that's DHL. That's where they have capacity right now. So right now, the number one constraint is capacity. And in the States, people are talking about like the fact that the New England Patriots put a plane in the air and they got 1 million masks back to New England. And that's wonderful, but that's the exception. And that's really pathetic. That should not be the exception. That should be the rule. Every country that needs PPE should be, I don't know, nationalizing, renting, whatever it might be. Give us more cargo capacity so that we can go pay the suppliers, guarantee them a market, and get the damn masks in the air before any more people die.
Okay, so really what you're saying is that is the bottleneck then, is really the transport end of things. It doesn't sound like it's a production. If you're finding factories switching over, with these factories, they were not producing masks 4 weeks ago, some of them.
Yeah. A lot of companies have pivoted and they've begun producing masks. If they're not very sophisticated, they'll produce the 3-ply surgical. So this is the lowest level of technical spec to do the 3-ply surgical disposable. And these are good enough for the average citizen. This is what someone in Hong Kong or Tokyo, just a citizen out on the street, is walking around in, or the receptionist at the healthcare clinic. The KN95s, which are the EU certification, which the FDA has finally agreed to let into the US, which the CDC have authorized. That's a little bit more complex, but the suppliers are really ramping up. So right now, the biggest barriers are financing. Right now, I can buy about 10,000 masks a day with the financing I have. I could buy 10x that if I had more money. And then the air freight. I think the air freight stuff will sort out over the next week. At some point, somebody's going to figure out, this is not rocket science. We need more planes in the air to everywhere. Okay. Not just the US. We need planes in the air to Canada, to Italy, to Spain. Anybody who wants one of these things should be able to get one. And until every one of those people has one, we can't sleep. The job is not done. We cannot fail our frontline healthcare workers or our average citizens or our 89-year-old mothers who want masks.
Right. Okay.
We shipped their 100 masks this morning. They're on the way.
So the two constraints are the procurement process and financing it, and two, the transport. The transport one looks like it's sorting itself. The procurement one then will be the one we have to solve.
Yes. It's really, well stated.
Okay. All right. And with beyond masks, are you looking at things beyond masks at this point? What is the next phase of this? Because you're in Hong Kong, you're well ahead. What are we going to experience? I'm here in the UK or the United States. What's going to happen in the United States? What are the next phases of things that we're going to need and the way to react to this situation?
That's a good question. So I just put in a request for proposal to a major foundation last night to get everything that foundation city needs. So it's gowns, surgical gowns. It's the eyewear, either the eyeglasses or the eye shields. Definitely gloves. Gloves are cheap and lightweight. So sourcing gloves in quantity is not difficult. We got to get out ahead of that. And then all kinds of masks, the N95, the KN95, and the surgical 3-ply. Need all those. We obviously need ventilators also, but ventilators are a very technical product. And because I'm not technical, I got a C in high school biology, full disclosure. We're avoiding doing, for example, through this citizen initiative, Operation Mask Lift, we're not doing test kits and we're not doing ventilators, simply because we feel that that's kind of just out of our area of expertise.
Right, a stage too far. So you're trying to hit the base level things that we'll be able to have a quick move to should the system kick in.
Yeah, and it's quite a bit like the early days of Room to Read. In the early days of Room to Read, we simply showed people a picture of a school, and we said, this school in Nepal or Vietnam or Cambodia does not have a library. For X number of dollars, you can help us put a library into that school. This operation is very similar to that. We're simply saying to people, if you know someone who needs masks, or you have a local hospital, or your EMT workers, your fire department, your police department need it, let us know. We'll send you the cost estimate and you can sponsor it. And then if you don't have someone that you know who's in need, but you want to help out anyway, that's where our Neediest Cases Fund comes in. That is unrestricted capital. It comes in, and then as we get, so I had an ER nurse last night from Parsippany, New Jersey. I had tears in my eyes because she said that they were literally washing their masks by hand and reusing them. and she's an ER nurse in one of the 5 richest states in America. I'm very proud to say, though, that there's good things that are happening. One of my friends, Michael Sissons, who lives out in Toronto, he's originally from Saskatoon, Canada. As of today, the Saskatoon Police Department, the Saskatoon EMTs, the Saskatoon Fire Department, all have donations of masks. My friend Sonny Calcy, who lives in New York, is right now out in Southampton. He's just given away 1,500 masks, 900 to hospitals, 300 to the police, 300 to the fire department, and to EMTs. So what's greatest about this for us is we had 11 days, I guess it's 12 days now. And the first 6, 7 days, there were a lot of problems. We were having procurement. We were rookies. We were novices. We were just trying to figure it out. And now finally, in the last 72 hours, and if people follow me on Twitter, John Wood RTR, or on LinkedIn, we're now being able to actually post photos of the actual recipients with the masks. We had a friend of mine who said that when he handed the masks over to his local hospital, one of the nurses started crying and said, now we know that people actually are paying attention to our needs.
Right. Interesting. So how can people best get involved? Where is there a website, or is there how are you organizing it?
I wish I could tell you that we're so sophisticated. We have a website and a Twitter feed and an Instagram feed. And we're just a bunch of sleep deprived ragtag volunteers. The best thing that people can do to help is to email me. I'll give out my personal email. It's John, John, @johnjwood.com. Please do not mail John at johnwood.com, because that guy gets annoyed, because it's John at johnj, my middle initial.com. What kind of inquiries do I want? I want inquiries from people who can help us to get things done. To be blunt, I don't need inquiries. I don't need a bunch of questions. I can send someone our Q&A document. What I don't need right now is a bunch of skeptics sending me mails saying, how can you prove thing X or prove thing Y or whatever it might be? We simply cannot have time to get into a lot of academic debates about this program. If people want to help us, though, for example, if people know of Frontline Medical who need masks and want to give us the shipping address, that's great. We'll help those people out. If they can pay for it, that's good, because it means we can buy more masks. If they can't pay for it, I can cover that out of the Neediest Cases Fund. If people work at companies and the companies are trying to do something, COVID-19 response at a corporate level, email me, John at johnjwood.com. We have a corporate donations program where corporations can supply. Again, what we want the corporations to do is supply cash. If a company has, whatever, a bunch of used equipment coming around, that's not really how we work. And then finally, if people just want to help us promote this on social media, and I've been amazed the number of people who have seen me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I had a guy in Chicago this morning. We have a conference call starting in exactly, I think he's getting up at 6 a.m. Chicago time to start it. And his goal is to basically reach out to 10 different families he knows who have resources and say, I'm going to put in X number of dollars. Why don't each of you match me? So those are great ways to help. I do encourage people to try to reach out. Again, my email is john at johnjwood.com, and whatever, people can do, it's just, we gotta think big about this right now. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of really big, well-organized relief efforts. I can give you maybe in closing, just really quick, I can give you in closing our numbers so people know that we are GSD, we are Get Shit Done. As of today, we've delivered about 12,500 masks directly in the first 12 days of this effort that are on the ground. We have 30,000 more that are in the air as of today. We'll have 50,000 more in the air as of tomorrow. And then tomorrow we start a production run of 100,000 masks in Yiwu, China, which we hope to get in the air by Wednesday or Thursday. So the numbers are ticking up nicely. Whether or not our trend line of masks is as high as a trend line of infections remains to be seen. I would love personally to see Operation Mask Lift actually get to a trend line that's steeper than the infection rate. Because until we do that, we're going to be really putting our frontline healthcare workers at risk. And I just remind people, there are hospitals we're hearing from right now where a third of the doctors and a third of the nurses are actually out on sick leave. Think about that. If you're dropping your mom off at the ER, or you yourself are sick, what's it like to go to a hospital that's already constrained? And then a third of the doctors and nurses are out on sick leave. And why are they on sick leave? Because they didn't have a product that you can source for $1.65. That's why they're on sick leave. Yeah. We've got to do better than this. When history looks back on this, we've got to be able to say that every one of us reached deep and did all we can. I've not been to bed before 3 a.m. That's why I sound so snarky sometimes, but I've not been in bed before 3 a.m. in a week. And I'm not going to. We just got to think big about this.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Sean, and good luck with the project. It sounds like you're doing some great work.
No, Thomas, good to see you again. And hopefully when this is all over, we'll have a couple beers and a pub more in London
together. Yes.
without a mask on. Okay.